Hey guys, and welcome to Should You Buy It, where all we do is talk a little bit about the game and whether or not we think it's worth the cost.
In this episode, we'll be playing Dying Light 2, the open-world survival horror game where you will have to parkour your way across a city of infected while also fighting its many dangerous encounters.
The first question that we always cover in these videos is what stage of development is the game in? And in this case, Dying Light 2 is currently in full release and available on PC as well as most consoles for $60.
So what exactly is the game? Well, Dying Light 2 is the sequel to the original Dying Light game, which came out over 7 years ago. The devs have taken many old features from the original game, as well as some new ones, such as the hang glider, and implemented them into this one.
First up, let's talk about parkour, as it's easily one of the most important parts of Dying Light 2. The game takes extremely heavy inspiration from the original game's parkour system. You have tons of things to climb, such as drain pipes, monkey bars, ledges, and much more. You will also have tons of other things to do, such as swinging on ropes, parkour, timed races, and even moving objects to teeter on. Don't worry though, as they certainly gave us plenty of ways to implement all this parkour into our combat.
At the beginning of the game, one of the first things that the game will teach you is how to mantle over your enemies after you stagger them so that you can kick another one square in the face. Even after doing this tons and tons of times, it simply just never gets old seeing your enemies go flying. You can also do tons of other parkour attacks, such as sprinting then jumping off an enemy's head high into the air just to land and kick them square into the ground. Aside from the parkour part of the combat, you can kick enemies into spiky objects to insta-kill them, light them on fire, explode them across a room, stagger them, or just kick them off the rooftops and watch them plummet to their demise.
The main part of the combat, however, is the weapon that you're going to be hacking and slashing with. Dying Light 2 has tons of weapons, armor, consumables, and throwables for you to craft and customize. You can also learn new blueprints and blueprint upgrades, which can be found in safe zones. These blueprints can then be used to craft items as well as mod your weapons. Just to give you an idea here, there are flame mods, blast mods, electric mods, and poison mods, which will each cause a different type of effect to happen to your enemies. Personally, I love the blast mod as it just sends your enemies flying. None of this should be overshadowed though by the game's new mechanics.
Some of the new mechanics include the glider, which you can only unlock a fair ways into the main storyline. It allows you to fly across very far distances and lets you use things like updrafts and gusts of wind to let you go even further. Just be careful not to accidentally close it or run out of stamina mid-air. Another new mechanic are the faction-controlled zones and safe houses. These usually take the form of windmills or special locations like the power plant. If you find one and complete its parkour puzzle, you'll then unlock a new safe zone with some quests and a merchant, or new zone-specific things that can change the things in your world. For an example, one of the first things you can unlock will be a bunch of added zip lines for you to get around the map easier.
Lastly, let's talk about the story. Warning, minor spoilers ahead. Don't worry, no major spoilers however. For those of you that are still here, all we're going to say is that it was kinda meh. There's some stuff that happens and it was okay, not too many shocking twists though, or incredibly interesting plot lines. It was relatively predictable, but it still had its own interesting flavor and taste to it. The game tries to sell you on the idea that your decisions will have these huge impacts on the story, but the unfortunate reality is in most cases that it has actually little to no impact. There are certainly a few moments where your decisions change the outcome of an event or even the ending of the story, but I would argue those big game-changing decisions aren't very common.
So now let's jump over to the pros and cons section for the video. First up for the pros is the graphical update from the previous game. Dying Light 2 has taken the graphical style from the previous game and made it less cartoony and more gritty. The detail you can see in the game, from the fiber weaving on people's clothes to the RTX lighting technology, are certainly a big step up from the previous game. After that is that Dying Light 2 keeps a good sense of surprise and horror, just like the original game. While the game is certainly more bright than its predecessor, it does still keep plenty of moments in it. And finally for the pros is that when the parkour works, it feels really good. Parkour is easily the most important part of Dying Light 2. The controls are a little weird, at least for mouse and keyboard users, but once you get a good feel for them, it's absolutely amazing. There's nothing like jumping from rooftop to rooftop like it's a zombie-filled first-person Assassin's Creed game.
Now for the cons. First up is that multiplayer is kinda super jank right now. It has tons of bugs and tons of issues. For an example, we personally ran into a quest where we were not able to progress because the game had bugged out and essentially soft locked us out of it. Personally, my biggest complaint is that you cannot both progress your quest lines when you're playing in multiplayer. This means that only the host will continue to progress their story while you're stuck sitting there not getting any progress except for items and levels. Next is that the kites honestly also feel extremely messed up and janky. The controls on them do not feel good both on mouse and keyboard and on console. In our experience, it never felt very intuitive and like something that you should easily be able to pick up. I think over time players will get comfortable with it, but at the end of the day it seems overcomplicated and could have been simplified much easier had the devs just simply played their own game a little bit more and realized that the controls just didn't feel that good. Last is that the game feels unpolished or almost unfinished in a lot of ways. Just to give you a perfect example, there is some good voice acting in the game. However, there is a lot of really bad voice acting in the game that sounds like they just took a dev out of the studio and said, hey, you're gonna play this guy, please go ahead and say his side quest lines for us, and decided that was good enough, instead of going out of their way to hire actual voice actors. Of course, I don't actually know if they did that or not, but it just doesn't sound very good. Overall though, there are just a lot of minor bugs and weird things that you come across. I mean, this isn't quite as bad as something like Cyberpunk 2077 when it launched, but it definitely could have been polished more and needed some more time baking in the oven.
So now here we are for the rating for the game, and when we rate games, we want to get 1 hour of enjoyment out of every $1 that we spend on the game. So for this game in particular, in Dying Light 2, we would want to get roughly 60 hours of enjoyment out of the $60 that we spent. And after putting well over 24 played hours into this game, we give it 7 out of 10 potatoes.
Yeah, Dying Light 2 is honestly a great game. Unfortunately though, for every 2 steps forward the game took, its bugs and weird controls took it a step back. The game is still very good in single player and extremely enjoyable. However, the multiplayer is certainly very lackluster at this stage of development. The game really just feels like it needed another few months to bake in the oven before being released to the public so that everything would feel well polished and with almost if not all the bugs ironed out. With all that being said though, even with the multiplayer difficulties and the bugs that you are bound to run into in its current state, Dying Light is probably worth the cost, and it will definitely be worth it once all the bugs are fixed.
Before you guys go, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe as we put out multiple new videos every single week, and your support is what makes this all possible. We can't do this without you guys, and if you would like to become part of our community, consider checking out our membership program or joining our Discord, which can be found in the description below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.